You mean to tell me that humans still use mechanical switches to control their power grid? The Arxian delegates' tentacles writhed in what their species considered barely contained laughter. How quaint. Yeah, well, at least our backup systems don't run on crystalline quantum harmonics that shatter if someone sneezes too hard. Sarah Martinez shot back, adjusting her UN ambassador's badge. She'd spent the last 3 hours trying to explain Earth's primitive infrastructure to these floating squid-like beings, and her patience was wearing thinner than their translucent skin. The Arxians' bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of an eye roll. Ambassador Martinez, surely you understand that your species' reliance on such analog methods puts you at a severe disadvantage in the greater galactic community. Sarah was about to respond with a particularly creative suggestion about where the Arxian could store their quantum harmonics when every screen in the UN conference room suddenly went dark. The gentle hum of air conditioning fell silent. Outside, New York City's ever-present glow flickered and died. Well, Sarah said with a grin that would have made a shark proud. Funny you should mention that. 72 hours earlier, Dr. James Chen had been staring at his solar observatory readings with the kind of expression usually reserved for people who've just discovered their winning lottery ticket was used as a coffee coaster. This can't be right, he muttered, pushing his glasses up his nose for the 15th time in as many minutes. The numbers don't, unless... His graduate student, Tommy, glanced up from his phone where he'd been doom-scrolling through the latest memes. What's up, Doc? He paused, grinning. Always wanted to say that. Remember that massive solar flare we detected last week? James didn't wait for an answer. Well, it wasn't just a flare. It was the opening act. Tommy set his phone down, recognizing the tone in his mentor's voice. The one that usually preceded either a groundbreaking discovery or a nervous breakdown. Sometimes both. Opening act for what? A coronal mass ejection. The biggest one I've ever seen, and it's headed straight for Earth. Tommy blinked. Like, Carrington event big? Bigger. James turned his monitor so Tommy could see the readings. Much bigger. This isn't just going to knock out a few telegraph offices. This is going to fry every sophisticated piece of electronics on the planet. But we've got safeguards now, right? Surge protectors and stuff? James laughed, but it wasn't the happy kind. Tommy, this is like bringing a paper umbrella to a hurricane. Our modern safeguards are designed to handle normal solar activity. This? He gestured at the screen. This is like trying to stop a tsunami with a pool noodle. The next 72 hours were a blur of emergency meetings, frantic preparations, and the kind of global cooperation that usually only happens in movies where aliens are about to invade. Which, ironically, was sort of happening. Just not the way anyone expected. The Arxians had arrived 6 months ago, all superior technology and condescending tentacles, just in time to witness humanity at its most spectacularly unprepared. Or so they thought. As Sarah stood in the darkened UN conference room, she couldn't help but smile at the Arxian delegates' growing distress. Their bioluminescence was flickering rapidly, their equivalent of a panic attack. Our systems! They're not responding! The Arxian's translator crackled with static before dying completely. Their backup quantum communications array made a sound like wind chimes in a blender before going dark. Yeah, about that, Sarah said, pulling out an ancient flip phone that looked like it had survived several wars and at least one washing machine incident. See, while you guys were busy mocking our primitive technology, we were busy implementing Operation Throwback. Operation Throwback, as it turned out, was humanity's greatest hold-my-beer moment in recent history. When the scientific community realized what was coming, they didn't try to stop it. They knew they couldn't. Instead, they did what humans do best. They adapted. In secret warehouses around the world, governments had been stockpiling technology that would make a 1980s Radio Shack employee weep with joy. Mechanical switches, analog circuits, vacuum tubes, and enough copper wire to gift-wrap the moon. While the Arxians smugly watched Earth's apparent lack of preparation for the coming solar storm, humanity was quietly going retro. You see, Sarah explained to the increasingly distressed Arxian delegate, now communicating through an honest-to-God mechanical translator that looked like a cross between a typewriter and a speak and spell. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Around the world, as the solar storm hit and modern electronics failed, something remarkable happened. Instead of chaos, there was order. Instead of panic, there was purpose. And instead of collapse, there was community. In New York, mechanical subway switches clicked into place as trains continued to run on backup systems that hadn't seen use since the Kennedy administration. In Tokyo, Traffic lights switched to wind-up mechanical timers that looked like they belonged in a steampunk novel. In London, the BBC began broadcasting on shortwave radio frequencies using equipment that had been gathering dust since World War II. The internet was down, but ham radio operators around the world created an impromptu communication network that would have made Samuel Morse proud. Teenagers who had never seen a rotary phone learned to operate manual telephone exchanges. Grandparents suddenly found themselves teaching skills they thought had been obsolete for decades. And through it all, the Arxians watched in bewilderment as their advanced technology failed, while humanity's primitive systems kept on ticking. But how? The Arxian delegates' tentacles were tied in literal knots as they watched a group of college students set up a mechanical computer that used water flows to perform calculations. "Your civilization should be in chaos!" Sarah leaned back in her chair, enjoying the moment perhaps a bit too much. "You know what the difference is between your technology and ours? Ours doesn't have to be perfect to work. We learned a long time ago that sometimes good enough is better than cutting edge." She pulled out a mechanical pencil and began writing on actual paper, a sight that made the Arxians' chromatophores pulse in distress. "While you were developing quantum harmonics and crystalline matrices, we were maintaining backup systems that you'd consider ancient. Why? Because we're paranoid? No, because we're practical." The Great Unplugging, as it came to be known, lasted for 2 weeks. 2 weeks during which humanity demonstrated that progress doesn't always mean abandoning the past. 2 weeks that changed how Earth was viewed by the galactic community. When the solar storm finally passed and modern technology could safely be reactivated, something had changed. The Arxians, and several other alien species, began sending delegations to Earth. Not to teach, but to learn. They wanted to understand how to build systems that could survive when their advanced technology couldn't. And humanity, being humanity, charged them through the nose for the privilege. "So," Sarah said, 6 months after the Great Unplugging, sitting across from a new Arxian delegate in a rebuilt UN conference room, "about those mechanical switches you were mocking." The Arxian's tentacles rippled in what Sarah had learned was embarrassment. We would be very interested in learning more about your backup systems." "Thought you might be." Sarah pulled out a contract written on actual paper. "Let's talk about licensing fees." Tommy found Dr. Chen in his observatory, still studying the after effects of the solar storm. "Hey, Doc, you're never going to believe this. Remember that old Commodore 64 you kept in your office for nostalgia?" James looked up from his readings. "The one everyone made fun of me for keeping?" "Yeah. Well, the Arxians want to buy it. They're offering enough money to fund the observatory for the next decade." James adjusted his glasses, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Tell them no." "What?" "But Doc." "Tell them no," James repeated. "And then tell them we'll teach them how to build their own for twice that amount." Tommy grinned. "You know, for a scientist, you can be pretty devious sometimes." "Tommy, my boy, the most important scientific principle is also the simplest. Everything fails eventually. The second most important principle?" James picked up his ancient, battle-scarred calculator. "Always keep a backup." The story of the Great Unplugging became a cautionary tale in galactic society, though not the one the aliens had expected to tell. It wasn't about the dangers of solar flares or the vulnerability of advanced technology. It was about the danger of assuming that newer always means better. Humanity had survived and thrived not because they were the most advanced species, but because they were the most adaptable. They kept the old while embracing the new, maintained the simple while developing the complex, and never forgot that sometimes the most elegant solution is also the most straightforward. And if they made a tidy profit teaching that lesson to their alien neighbors, well, that was just good old human ingenuity at work. Sarah kept the flip phone on her desk, even after everything went back to normal. It sat next to her quantum communicator and holographic display, a reminder of an important truth. Progress isn't about replacing the old with the new. It's about knowing when to use each. The Arxian delegates still winced whenever they saw it, but they'd learned to stop commenting. After all, as humans like to say, the proof was in the pudding, even if they had to explain to the aliens what pudding was and why proof would be in it. As for humanity, they went right back to their old habits, arguing about politics on social media, binge-watching holostreams, and generally taking their technology for granted. But now, in basements and warehouses around the world, there were backup systems maintained with religious devotion. Just in case. Because if there's one thing humans learned from the Great Unplugging, it's that sometimes the best way to move forward is to remember how to go back. And somewhere in New York, In a drawer in Sarah Martinez's desk, there's a flip phone with a full battery charge. Just in case. After all, you never know when you might need to save the world with obsolete technology. You humans, the Zalaxian ambassador buzzed, their crystalline wings catching the light, have become insufferably smug since the Great Unplugging. Sarah Martinez, now promoted to Earth's chief ambassador for interspecies relations, a job title she still couldn't say with a straight face, smiled her best diplomatic smile. We prefer the term appropriately confident. You're charging outrageous fees for technology that's centuries outdated. And yet, Sarah countered, tapping her trusty flip phone, you're still paying them. The Zalaxian's wings vibrated in frustration, creating a sound like angry wind chimes. The Arxians wouldn't be in this mess if they hadn't bought into your retrograde revolution. Sarah's smile faded. The Arxian situation was exactly why she'd called this meeting. 3 days ago, their entire colony on Proxima B had gone dark. Not the usual kind of dark. The kind that happened when someone tried to improve Earth's backup systems with alien tech. About that, she said, pulling out an actual paper notebook, which made the Zalaxian visibly wince. We need to talk about your species' recent, shall we say, unauthorized modifications to our licensed technology. Meanwhile, aboard the Arxian colony ship orbiting Proxima B, things were not going well. Try turning it off and on again, shouted Chief Engineer Glexborp, their tentacles frantically working 3 different control panels at once. We can't turn it off, Junior Engineer Skakeplex responded, their bioluminescence flickering in panic. The quantum-enhanced power switches are locked in a probabilistic state of being both on and off. How is that even possible? We thought we could improve the primitive human design by adding quantum uncertainty. GLX-Borp's chromatophores flashed what in Arxian culture was the equivalent of a massive facepalm. You added quantum uncertainty to an on-off switch? It seemed like a good idea at the time. Back on Earth, Dr. James Chen was enjoying his retirement. Well, retirement in the sense that he'd only taken on 3 research projects instead of his usual 7. He was sitting in his garden, teaching his granddaughter how to use a slide rule, when his ancient pager buzzed. Yes, a pager. After the Great Unplugging, they'd made a comeback bigger than vinyl records. The message was simple. Arxians broke it. Help. James sighed, looking apologetically at his granddaughter. Sorry, sweetie. Looks like Grandpa has to go save some aliens from themselves. Again. Can I come? 7-year-old Lucy asked, clutching the slide rule like it was a magic wand. James considered it for a moment. You know what? Why not? It's never too early to learn about the family business of unfixing alien fixes to human technology. Tommy, no longer a graduate student but now the head of the International Institute for Retrograde Engineering, IYRE, was already waiting at the spaceport when James and Lucy arrived. You brought your granddaughter to a potential interstellar crisis, he asked, raising an eyebrow. She's better with analog technology than half your staff, James replied. Besides, she already finished her homework. Lucy proudly held up her slide rule. I can calculate logarithms! Tommy shook his head, grinning. Of course you can! Well, come on then. The Arxians are having a collective meltdown, literally, in the case of their quantum processors. The spacecraft waiting for them was a perfect example of the new human philosophy of technological development. Cutting-edge systems backed up by thoroughly tested primitive technology. The navigation computer was state-of-the-art, but next to it sat a sextant and a set of paper star charts. The engines were antimatter-powered, but the backup systems ran on good old-fashioned chemical rockets. So, James said as they strapped in, what exactly did they do this time? Tommy pulled out a folder. Yes, an actual paper folder, and handed it over. They tried to optimize our backup systems. Added quantum uncertainty to the mechanical switches, replaced the copper wiring with crystalline neural networks, and, my personal favorite, attempted to upgrade the analog gauges with psychic resonance meters. James pinched the bridge of his nose. They do realize the whole point of our systems is that they're not fancy, right? Apparently not. Lucy, who had been quietly listening while calculating the ship's trajectory on her slide rule just for practice, spoke up. They made it too complicated? Exactly, James said proudly. Sometimes the best solution is the simple solution. The scene that greeted them aboard the Arxian colony ship was chaos of the highest order. Tentacles were tangled, chromatophores were flashing emergency patterns, And in one corner, a quantum-enhanced coffee maker was simultaneously producing and not producing coffee in what appeared to be a caffeinated version of Schrödinger's experiment. "Oh, thank the ancestral seas," Chief Engineer Glexborp exclaimed upon seeing them. "We've tried everything." "Have you tried not trying everything?" Lucy asked innocently. The Arxians all turned to stare at her, quite a feat considering their distributed visual organs. "What do you mean, tiny human?" Glexborp asked. Lucy shrugged. "When my tablet gets weird, sometimes I just leave it alone for a bit and it fixes itself." James and Tommy exchanged looks. Out of the mouths of babes. "She's right," James said. "Your first problem was thinking you needed to fix something that wasn't broken. Your second problem was trying to fix your fixes. Right now, every system you've improved is fighting with every other system you've improved, creating a cascade of quantum uncertainty that's—" He paused, looking at a readout. "Currently making your life support system try to decide if air should be a gas or a liquid." "But we made it better," protested Junior Engineer Skakeplex. "No," Tommy said gently. "You made it different, and different isn't always better. Sometimes a switch just needs to be a switch." It took 3 days to unimprove all of the Arxians' improvements. Lucy, it turned out, had an uncanny knack for explaining complex concepts in simple terms that even frustrated aliens could understand. "See?" she'd say, demonstrating with her slide rule. "This always gives the same answer because it doesn't try to think about it. It just does what it's supposed to do." By the time they were done, the Arxian colony was running on systems that would have looked familiar to an engineer from 1960. They were bulky, they were inelegant, and they worked perfectly. Back on Earth, Sarah was finishing up her meeting with the Zalaxian ambassador. "So you see," she concluded, "we're not charging high prices because we're smug. We're charging high prices because apparently we need to include a 'don't try to improve this' clause in every contract, with penalties severe enough to make even the most innovative engineer think twice." The Zalaxians' wings had stopped their angry buzzing, and now just drooped in resignation. "And the consulting fee for fixing the Arxian colony?" Sarah smiled. "Oh, that one's free." "Free?" The ambassador's wings perked up in surprise. "Yes, courtesy of our newest consulting engineer." She slid across a crayon drawing of an Arxian trying to quantum-enhance a light switch. Signed, Lucy Chen, age 7. "Sometimes," Sarah said, "you need a child to point out when the Emperor has no clothes, or when the aliens are overthinking their switches." The incident became known as the Great Reboot, and it taught the galactic community another important lesson about humanity. Not only were they stubborn enough to keep using obsolete technology, but they were also smart enough to know exactly why they were keeping it. Lucy Chen went on to become the youngest ever professor at the International Institute for Retrograde Engineering, teaching both humans and aliens the art of knowing when not to improve something. And somewhere in space, there's an Arxian colony running on technology that would look right at home in a museum, steadfastly refusing all attempts to upgrade it. After all, as Lucy likes to say, if it's not broken, don't quantum enhance it. "Did you know," 12-year-old Lucy Chen announced to the assembled galactic delegation, "that humans once built a spacecraft that went to the moon using less computing power than a modern toaster?" The various alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. 5 years after the Great Reboot incident, Lucy had become something of a celebrity in interstellar engineering circles, partly because of her brilliant mind, but mostly because she had an uncanny ability to make advanced species feel silly about their over-reliance on cutting-edge technology. "Impossible," declared the Moravian representative, their crystalline form vibrating with skepticism. "Our calculations indicate that lunar navigation requires at least 3 quantum cores and—" Lucy held up her trusty slide rule. "This got us there." In the back of the room, Sarah Martinez, now Secretary General of the United Nations Office for Interstellar Affairs, tried not to laugh at the collective gasp of horror from the alien delegates. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, humanity's primitive approach to technology was causing an unexpected crisis. "They're reproducing," reported Zalaxian Scout Commander Tsekt, their wings buzzing in distress as they transmitted footage back to Earth. "The backup systems are reproducing." Dr. James Chen, now well into his 70s but still sharp as ever, leaned forward in his chair at Mission Control. "That's not supposed to happen." On the view screen, they watched as mechanical switches and analog gauges seemed to multiply across the surface of a distant space station. The station had been abandoned decades ago by its original builders, a now-extinct species called the Precursors. When humanity's retro-technology revolution had swept the galaxy, someone had apparently decided to upgrade the station with Earth-style backup systems. Oh no, Tommy groaned from his position next to James. Please tell me someone didn't try to quantum-enhance the self-repair protocols? James finished. It looks like they did exactly that. But we specifically put that in the never ever do this section of the manual. Since when do engineers read manuals? Sarah found Lucy in her laboratory at the International Institute for Retrograde Engineering, surrounded by dismantled calculators and what appeared to be a mechanical computer made entirely of marbles and rubber bands. Please tell me you figured out how to stop rogue analog technology from eating the precursor station, Sarah said by way of greeting. Lucy didn't look up from her marble machine. Better, I figured out why it's happening. She pulled a marble from her pocket and dropped it into the contraption. Through an intricate series of bounces and rolls, it eventually triggered a small bell. Sarah blinked. They tried to make mechanical switches. Organic? Yup. Lucy popped the P sound with all the satisfaction of a preteen who'd solved a problem that had stumped the galaxy's finest minds. They figured since Earth technology was so primitive, it must be more compatible with biological systems than their advanced tech. And now we have analog systems that think they're alive, running on biotech that thinks it's mechanical, installed in a station that thinks it's supposed to evolve. Lucy grinned. It's actually kind of cool. Sarah rubbed her temples. Please tell me you have a solution that doesn't involve evacuating that entire sector of space. Of course. Lucy held up what looked like an old wind-up alarm clock. We just need to give it a bedtime. The rescue mission to the precursor station was perhaps the strangest in human history. The ship was crewed entirely by engineers who'd failed their advanced technology certifications, but scored perfectly on tests involving steam engines and mechanical calculators. Remember, James briefed the team, with Lucy at his side. We're not trying to destroy the rogue systems, we're trying to teach them good habits. Like a really big, really complicated puppy, Lucy added helpfully. The engineers exchanged confused looks, but they'd learned long ago not to question Lucy's metaphors. They tended to be oddly accurate. The station, when they reached it, was a sight to behold. What had once been a sleek monument to advanced technology now looked like something out of a steampunk fever dream. Brass gears the size of houses rotated slowly against the starfield. Mechanical arms made of self-replicating analog components reached out into space like massive wind-up toys. It's beautiful, Lucy whispered, pressing her face against the viewport. It's an abomination, grumbled the Zalaxian observer. Same thing sometimes, Lucy replied with a shrug. The plan, as Lucy explained it, was simple. We're going to give the station a routine. Using her modified alarm clock, which she'd somehow integrated with principles of precursor biotech that even the precursors hadn't fully understood, they began to introduce the concept of cycles to the runaway analog systems. See, the problem isn't that it's replicating, Lucy explained as they worked. The problem is that it doesn't know when to stop. It's like when you get a song stuck in your head and it just keeps going and going. She connected her device to the station's central hub, so we're teaching it to sleep sometimes. To everyone's amazement, except Lucy's, it worked. The wild replication of analog components began to follow a pattern. During active periods, the station would continue to grow and evolve its mechanical systems. During sleep cycles, it would focus on maintenance and repair. Did we just turn a space station into a living creature with a circadian rhythm? Tommy asked incredulously. We just reminded it that even machines need downtime. The incident became known as the Analog Revolution, though not in the way anyone expected. Rather than being seen as a cautionary tale about mixing technologies, it became the galaxy's first example of genuine technological evolution. The precursor station, now nicknamed Rip Van Winkle by the human engineers, became a hub for studying the intersection of organic and mechanical systems. Under Lucy's guidance and strict bedtime enforcement, it continued to grow and develop in controlled ways, creating new forms of hybrid technology that no one had thought possible. You know what the really funny part is? Lucy said to Sarah months later, as they watched the station's mechanical arms perform their evening maintenance routine before powering down for the night. Everyone thought Earth's backup systems were primitive because they were simple. But simple things can grow into complex things naturally. It's forcing complexity that causes problems. Sarah smiled. Is this going to be another slide rule metaphor? Nope, Lucy replied, pulling out her grandfather's old calculator. Sometimes a calculator is just a calculator. Until it isn't. On the station below them, gears the size of cities turned slowly in their sleep, dreaming whatever dreams may come to awakened machines that still run on springs and levers. The galactic community had to revise its textbooks yet again. Humanity hadn't just taught them about the value of reliable backup systems, or the importance of not overcomplicating simple solutions. Now they demonstrated that true technological advancement sometimes meant letting things evolve at their own pace. And in her lab at the International Institute for Retrograde Engineering, Lucy Chen continued to play with her marble machines, knowing that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from just letting things roll. As for the aliens, they finally started reading the manuals. Well, some of them did. The rest just asked Lucy to explain it with marbles.